Welcome back to Race Report, everyone. We've just finished the Turkish Grand Prix for the 2021 season, and it wasn't the best race in the world, but there was some interesting things to talk about, so let's get stuck straight in. Coming into the weekend, we knew that Hamilton would be taking a 10-place engine penalty for the race. He took a new internal combustion engine, which takes him up to 4 for the season, which is 1 over his allowed usage. Mercedes said they thought this would be a good race with plenty of overtaking opportunities to take that penalty, so they decided to take it now rather than later. We also saw Sainz take the same penalty, although he changed multiple parts of his engine, so he actually started at the back of the grid. And we also saw Red Bull running a custom livery this weekend as well. It was a very pretty livery. It is a tribute to their partnership with Honda. Obviously, this weekend was meant to be the Japanese Grand Prix, and that is reflected in my gameplay in the background as well. Unfortunately, there's no Turkey in the F1 2021 game, so I had to go with Japan. And Red Bull thought the same. They have their new Honda livery this weekend as a special tribute for their partnership. It's a quite nice livery. I thought it was very pretty, although at first when I saw it in the practice sessions, I did keep getting confused with the old Toyota liveries from the 2000s. I'm not sure if I was alone there, but yeah, at first glance I was like, oh, is that a Toyota? Oh no, it's the Red Bull livery. Anyway, to set the scene, coming into this race, Hamilton had a 2-point lead in the championship, but where did he end up afterwards? Let's check in with qualifying. It was a bit of a damp qualifying, but teams were going out on slick tyres. It did result in a lot of spinning, of course, but it was all about that track evolution. So going out last on the damp track was key because it was slightly drier than when you go out first. And this did result in one of our shock eliminations from Q1 in Daniel Ricciardo. McLaren just didn't get the timing right of his release onto the track, so he went out. But one man's poor result is another man's great result. That did mean we saw Mick Schumacher in Q2 in the Haas again. Brilliant stuff. In the end, Hamilton dominated qualifying as he had done in the practice sessions. He qualified in first, but of course he dropped down to 11th in the race due to his engine penalty, which meant Bottas actually took pole position. He started in P1, Verstappen in P2, and Leclerc with a very good P3. On the morning of the race, it was announced that Ricciardo, after his poor qualifying session, would also take an engine change, so he dropped to the back of the grid. I mean, why not? He qualified in something like 16th, so 4 places, what's that going to do? But crucially, there had been more rainfall at the track since qualifying, so all the cars started on inters. There was a lot of chat about that crossover time of where we would go to slicks, but we never actually did. Well, we never really did, except for Vettel with 1 lap, but I'll come to that in a second. At the start of the race, everyone got off the line really well. It was only into turn 1 where we saw 3 abreast. We had Perez on the inside, Gasly as the sandwich filling, and then Alonso on the outside, where we saw contact between Gasly and Alonso. This sent Alonso spinning off the circuit, but he did manage to rejoin. He rejoined down in 17th. But Gasly unfortunately got a rather harsh 5-second penalty for that incident. He couldn't have really done much. Like I said, he was just the sandwich filling. A couple of corners later, Alonso, in his new position of 17th, actually hit Mick Schumacher as well, causing a 5-second penalty for Alonso himself. So eventful old lap for Alonso right now. There's a really good first couple of laps fighting between Sainz and Ricciardo at the back of the grid. And we also saw Hamilton go on the charge, attacking as much as possible. Obviously, he's trying to make up these places from 11th, so that was good to see as well. Perez also got a good start as well, jumping up to 4th. After that first initial push and pull, we did kind of settle into a rhythm. Not much action going on out on track, if I'm honest. This is where it kind of got a little bit dull. But there were 2 men that were still making moves. Of course, Hamilton being one of them, he's trying to move up from 11th. And he did. He was slowly picking off people one at a time. But the other man who was really making moves was Sainz. Obviously, he's coming from the back of the grid, and he was absolutely on it. Very good late braking maneuvers in wet conditions. Fantastic to watch. As the race went on, the inter tyres were getting bald and starting to turn into slicks, but they were still working, and we weren't yet at the position where we could go on to actual slick tyres. That was a very interesting position we were in when it came around to the first pit stops. Daniel Ricciardo was the first man to pit on lap 22. He took the new inter tyres, and then everybody was watching him like a hawk. Are his times going to get better? Are his times going to get worse? Let's see. Initially, he came out slower. Everybody was like, oh, okay, we're going to stay out on our old tyres. But then slightly more rain came down, nothing significant, but then his tyres started to improve. Again, it wasn't significant enough, so nobody really came in. It wasn't until lap 32, a full 10 laps later, that Alonso then came in. He took his 5-second penalty and then slapped on new inters, and he came back out. It was around this time we were actually seeing a brilliant battle between Perez and Hamilton. Hamilton's obviously moved really far up. He's now challenging, I think, for 4th place with Perez, and it was a brilliant scrap between them two. One fight lasted, I think it was like 4 or 5 corners where they're side by side. Oh, it was 2 amazing racers going at it. It was around lap 37 where we had a big flurry of pit stops. Almost everybody that hadn't come in already started to come in for new inter tyres. Everyone except Vettel. Vettel came in and went on to slick medium tyres. That was a big moment. His gamble didn't pay off, sadly. He dropped right down the order and had to come in 1 lap later for new inters. He was like Bambi on ice out there with those slicks. We also saw a slow pit stop for Sainz at that time, 8 seconds in the pit box for him, all attributed to the new pit stop system there. So that sadly did a bit of damage to the hard work he'd done recovering from his poor position. After all those pit stops were done, there was a few curiosities out on track. Interestingly enough, Hamilton had stayed out on old inters, and he'd now moved up to 4th. Leclerc had stayed out on old inters, and he'd moved up to 1st. And Ocon had stayed out on his old inters as well. So the big question here is, could these guys go to the end? Could they do the full race distance on one set of inter tyres? Leclerc was the first to brake. He lost his first position to Bottas on lap 47, and on lap 48 he came in for new inters. He did drop back to 4th place. He was ahead of Perez but behind Hamilton at that time. He was probably the most vocal on the radio saying, hey, can we actually do this? What's going on here? So it's nice to actually hear his view on how things were going. There was a bit of chat on the Mercedes radio where they were trying to call Hamilton in, but Hamilton was going, hey, look, my tyres are fine right now. You know, not brilliant, but I'm going okay. But they did finally get him in the pits on lap 51. He drops down to 5th place because of that move, behind both Leclerc and Perez. At this point, there was a lot of tension between Hamilton and the pit wall after that stop. Hamilton was really not happy to be dropped down the order. He thought he could have stayed out, and he was right behind Verstappen, so the points he would have lost would have been very marginal. I think there must have been some data that the pit wall was seeing about maybe how Leclerc was catching him and he could only stop now, or maybe Gasly would have caught him if he hadn't stopped. Who knows? But yeah, lots of tension over the radio, and I don't think we got the whole picture from the Mercedes side of why they took that stop. That just left Ocon left on his old tyres, and he went the whole race on one set of tyres. He finished in 10th place, so fair play to Ocon. Way to look after your tyres there. That's brilliant stuff. Ultimately, Valtteri Bottas wins, and in very dominant style, fastest lap as well. He looked so composed, so cool, so calm. He just had it in the bag this entire race. Verstappen takes the lead in the championship again. He finished in 2nd place. He is now 6 points in the lead of the championship. And Perez comes home in 3rd as well. A really good race for him, a really good race for Red Bull overall. Hamilton finished 5th in the end. I imagine if before the start of the race you offered Hamilton 5th as opposed to Verstappen 2nd, he probably would have taken it. Obviously 6 points isn't a massive gap, but I'm sure he feels he lost points because of that pit stop at this stage. It'll be interesting to see how they do going forward. However, my drive of the day doesn't go to any of those guys. It goes to Carlos Sainz. He's come from the back of the grid and he's finished in 8th. after a 8-second pit stop as well. What a drive. That's a brilliant drive. And to be honest, it did get boring at parts during this race, and he was the only thing keeping it lively. So fair play to him. That's why he gets my driver of the day. And we move on to the next race in Austin in the United States. We start our American leg of the campaign, and we're fully into the coming toward the end of the season now. So it's time for things to get very interesting in the championship. What a fight we're having. It's been brilliant, and I hope it continues to be brilliant from here on in. What did you guys think of the race? Was there any interesting bits that you found that I didn't quite pick up on? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching that video. I really do appreciate the support. If you want to see more from me, I'm going to put a couple of extra videos on the left-hand side of the screen here for you. Just go ahead and click on one of those. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to put a subscribe button. If you want to support me and support the channel, I very much appreciate it. Thank you.